Attention listeners, mark your calendars for Colorado Gives Day on December 10th. Support Aftersight and give to the causes you care about. Go to coloradogivesday.org/organizations/aftersight between now and December 10th to make your donation.
You're listening to The Blind Chick, an Aftersight original podcast. We're telling you stories about strength, overcoming hurdles.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Blind Chick. That's Moses Street.
Who you really are.
And that's Penn Street.
Blindness can
the
be
Blind Chick. And more important, all of you people out there listening to us, we love you, and it is so exciting that you care enough about the blind world to tune in every week. So thank you. Gotcha on that one, didn't I?
You always have to throw in a ringer.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's right.
Well, gosh, Mose, it's 2024 is actually winding down, and I cannot believe that we're at the end of the year already, and we made it through Thanksgiving, and, you know, it's only... I know. The Thanksgiving is only in the United States. Somebody actually stopped and reminded me of that the other day. And I was like, I do know that Thanksgiving is only for us here in the United States of America. I do know that. And yes, Christmas. Christmas is just basically, it's going to be Christmas marathon to the end of the year.
Yeah, kinda. I'm also 31 days away from my 77th birthday. So that's also exciting on top of Christmas. And just a quick, even though this isn't, Thanksgiving will be well over, our Thanksgiving was so cool. Penn went out and got a 1921 vintage house in immaculate 1921 look. And so we all dressed up in very good 1920s clothing for Thanksgiving dinner. And then, of course, did a lot of photos.
Yes, it was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah,
the grandkids got into it, and everybody just got into it.
Yeah.
It was absolutely amazing.
And so for Christmas, I'm going to dress up like Santa, and the whole family has to dress up like elves.
Speaking of angels, actually today's guest has the voice of a Christmas angel all year round, not just at Christmas. And I'm so thrilled to have her on The Blind Chick. Denise Leigh, welcome to The Blind Chick.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
Yes, we are excited. You've had a really fascinating life, and can't wait to get into it. So, but to start out, where are you talking to us from?
Right, so I'm in a very small village in North Staffordshire, which is in the North Midlands in England, and I'm about 30 miles south of Manchester, and more specifically, I'm sitting in my attic in my very early 20th century terraced house.
Sounds beautiful.
So I think it was... Yeah, it's great. I still live in the village I was born in, so I'm really lucky, actually, because, I mean, I've travelled around the world, but I've always come back here. And we did have a bit of an abrasion where we left the village for 5 years, and we were so homesick. We were only 2 miles down the road, and we were homesick, so we came back.
How big?
Because we're just such villagers.
Wow. How big is your village? How many people, roughly? It's
spread over quite a big area, but probably about 3,000 people over four villages in the whole parish.
Wow!
That
So
is
a lot
small.
of that is spread. A lot of that is it's a very a very old farming community. Used to be a mining community, but the pit closed a long time ago, because like pits flood or there are often disasters there, so they don't reopen them again. And we did have a pit disaster here, so it just never reopened again.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's still very much an agricultural rural area.
Oh, it sounds wonderful.
Wow, your little town sounds just like a Christmas card.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. They're selling Christmas cards with pictures of the village.
Ah, that's great. That's great.
I wish I could buy some of those Christmas cards with the pictures of your village on it.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's just a lovely place to bring up children as well.
Well, Denise, you have accomplished so much in your life thus far, and I don't even really know where to begin. I was looking up all your accomplishments and your bio and everything, and I was like, wow, I just don't know, like, where we're going to, where and how we're going to cover all of this. But I thought we would just start at the beginning. That's always a good place to start. I know that you were born with RP, which is retinitis pigmentosa, just like your mom. Can you share a little bit about what that was like? My mom was also low vision, and I know that was really a positive thing for me to actually grow up with a mother that kind of knew what I was going through. But could you share, sort of your early school years and what life was like when you started school and this whole entire journey you call life?
Yeah, I think it was a really positive thing because, of course, it was obvious straight away that I had a sight impairment. I think the medical experts thought it was a lot worse at the time. They thought I got a lot less sight than I actually had. But it was up to my parents. My dad was sighted. My mum was blind. It was up to them to be able to prove that I could see because the medical professionals were saying I couldn't see. And, when I was little, I was taught to read Braille and print. So it was obvious that I was going to have to go into the residential education system because that's all there was available for blind children at that time. We're talking the early 1970s. My parents tried to fight it, but lost. And I went to a boarding school south of Birmingham in a place called Bromsgrove, and the school doesn't exist anymore. It was called Lickey Grange, and I get the impression it was the worst of all of the residential education settings. Whenever you mention it to people, they're like, oh yeah, that was like Borstal, which is where you send really naughty kids. It was and it was a long way. It's a good 60 miles from home. And my parents didn't have a car, so, that was that. There were no weekend visits home, that sort of thing. So when you went for half a term. And when you're 6, that is a really long time. But on the other hand, I went into school able to read Braille and print. I don't remember being taught to read Braille. And I don't know whether I was ever taught grade 1. I think she just threw me straight in at the deep end with grade 2. So I'd been given a real head start, which a lot of the other children there, they were the only blind person in their family. So their parents had to go through the shock and the distress of having their child diagnosed with a sight impairment. Whereas my parents had kind of had the opposite. They'd had to prove that I could see, rather than having it proved that I couldn't see.
That's a real switch. But
Yeah.
I'm also curious because reading about you going to the school, like in America with the indigenous Indians, they had, it sounds kind of similar in that the Indian people were forced that they had to send their children to boarding schools so they could become white people, which is ridiculous. And the horror stories out of that was it the kind of horror story like Mrs. Hannigan and Annie?
Yeah, I mean, I think without throwing anybody under the train, you do get a type of person who goes to work with vulnerable children. Sometimes you get great people who do it for altruistic reasons. Other times you get people who want to be put in a place of work with vulnerable children, and their intentions are not honourable. So that there was a lot of child abuse, and there was a lot of physical abuse. We were smacked. We were shut into cupboards. We were force-fed in the cases of some children who were so homesick they couldn't eat. I used to get really upset when my parents phoned on a Tuesday night, so they cut all contact with home. They said that was it. It was too upsetting.
And you're only 6 years old.
It was horrendous. Yeah, and there were younger kids than me. There were kids of 3 and 4 there, so it wasn't a happy environment. Those first couple of year groups at that school, I wasn't there for that long, thankfully.
Right.
But those kids, those little kids, were so unhappy. And quickly they learn not to be, but then you have to wonder about, the fractured relationships they have with their families then.
As a kid, I actually did hear about some of the schools for blind children and deaf children here in the United States. And I remember being just so thankful that I didn't have to go away.
Oh, man, because it's here in the States, up until 10 years ago, if you were blind and had a child, they took your kid away because you couldn't possibly raise them. Which is ridiculous.
Oh my God.
Yeah, 10 years ago. And to me, that is the most horrific thing in the world.
That's horrendous.
Until your story.
I've got 4 children. I've got 4 children. I mean, I do remember I had a very bad experience with a social worker who, in Britain, when you're blind, I don't know if they still do it anymore, actually, but they used to give you a free radio or a radio cassette, and social services would give you these, and then you could go and you could get free batteries from social services. And I got a newborn baby, and I was very, very young. I was 22.
Okay.
And I walked down into the local town to go and get the batteries for my free radio. Right. And obviously somebody saw me there with a pram and thought, oh, this is a woman who we should look at closely. Oh. But this was nearly 31 years ago. And then the next day I get a knock on the door, and it's a sighted social worker with a blind social worker. Oh. And they said, right, we're putting your baby on a high risk list. And I said, why? And they said, because you can't see. I lost my shit completely. I chased them down the street.
Boy, this sure does
just to prove that I was a balanced, rounded adult. I chased them out of the house. This was 1994. And then in 2008, Stefan, my husband, went in for a guide dog. And he was on one of those client days that you get when they haven't got you a dog, but they want you to trial walk some dogs. Right. And he'd gone down to Shropshire, which is quite away from here, and there were some people who were on class. One of them was a blind social worker, and he went, oh, I think I know your wife. And he said, do you? He said, yes, she once chased me. She once chased me from the house. He said, I've never forgotten it. But to be fair, he did say, we were really heavy-handed with her. They didn't put Rebecca on a high-risk list. She wasn't
good.
She wasn't at risk in any way. But the amount of people who would say, you will tread on your baby. And I didn't. I didn't. I never trod on any of them.
Oh, when you're saying...
Not by accident. I'm only joking. I never trod on a child deliberately.
That's right. Yeah, we got to clarify. Yeah, I would say outrageous stuff like that about what I did to my kids, and I had to be really careful because people often believed me. So,
well, yeah, people just don't understand that you're joking. One of my older ones used to love me to put my foot on his tummy and shake him, just like sort of like shake him from side to side, side to side. And he used to say in company, "Tread on me, mummy, tread on me." And I used to have to explain to people, I do not tread on this child.
That's great. That's great.
And he's a very rounded 27-year-old man who with a proper job and who hasn't been through therapy. He's fine.
I know people think that it's a miracle that blind people can have children and raise them, and it's not that different than sighted parents. But they make it out like we're doing this sort of supernatural thing that is just beyond comprehension.
Well, it would. Yeah. So, we want to get on to all your accomplishments, but you're bringing up so many questions. So you had 4 children. So I'm around hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of blind people, and to me, they're the greatest community on the planet. But for people that, like a lot of people tune in just to learn about the blind world and they think your life is over.
Yeah.
So when you're raising 4 kids, I mean, you had to have had, the positives of, how did you handle that?
I often say to people that the older 3, because the older 3 were born very close together. So Rebecca was born at the beginning of 94, Michael was born at the beginning of 96, and Sam was born in the autumn of 97. So there was something like 20 months between the oldest and the youngest. Wow. She was 3.5 when he was born. So, and there was 19 months between Michael and Sam. So they could have run rings around me. They could have absolutely made my life hell. And they didn't, actually. Because I found that because there were 3, there were always 2 that had an allegiance with each other, and it used to chop and change. It was never the same 2. But the other one was always willing to snitch on the others. So I just parented with biscuits and snitching. I encouraged tale telling. I didn't discourage it at all. It was the only way I could control them, because it was like herding cats.
That's funny.
But they were lovely. They were great fun. And I used to walk around with 1 on my chest and 2 in a tandem buggy, those push chairs. You call them strollers, don't you? But and I would put my tiny baby in the back, and then the most responsible child in the front, which was always Rebecca. And then I'd carry Michael along on my back, and Becky would alert me to hazards like, "Mummy, there's dog poo," or "Mummy, there's a lamppost," and because because we live in this little village,
right?
I know where every landmark is. I mean, even if I'm in a car and I'm travelling around the village, I know where I am because of the camber of the roads and things like that, because I've lived here all my life. But if we'd go into the local town, she was really useful there, because she'd tell me where all the advertising, like all the A-boards were and things like that, or if there was a bollard, or, I never did anything dangerous with her, like push them out into traffic or anything like that. I was really very aware of what we were doing. I was most definitely the responsible adult, but I had used to get into bed some nights and think, oh, thank God nobody died. So it was a good day. That was the hallmark of a good day.
That is a good day when nobody dies.
Yeah, because I was very young, and I got 3 children by the time I was 26. And now all my older children are older than 26, because Sam was 27 in October. And I think, how did I do it? Really, how did I do it? But
But you
I
did
it because
you did.
yeah, because they were great kids. They were great kids,
Yeah.
and I had my parents just around the corner, which was wonderful.
Oh.
And it is true. You do need a village to raise children.
Yes. And I wish more people believe that, because kids that are raised by a village grow up so much more secure than the kiddos that don't feel that way.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, because I know RP is hereditary. Do any of your children, do they have RP?
Well, the older three will be carriers of the condition, but they're not manifest sufferers of the condition. And then, so they are from my previous marriage. And me and their dad separated when Becky she was 11. And Michael was 9, Sam was 7. And then I met Stefan, and we had Dimitri in 2012. So he's a lot younger than the others.
Yeah.
Now, it's a recessive condition. I know it's a recessive condition because I've had all the sort of paperwork filled in, and the geneticist said that's how it was. And then Dimitri presented with this condition. First of all, I noticed he had a nystagmus, which is, I don't know whether you know what that is, but it's like a lateral uncontrollable movement in the eye.
Oh,
and
yes.
My friend who's a paramedic noticed, and she just said, look, I really think you need to go and get him checked over, because he's not focusing and he wasn't reaching for things. You know, when I held toys out to him and when I was sitting with him on my knee and I was reading to him, he wasn't reaching out and touching pictures in the book. And I think I knew in my heart that there was something wrong, but you don't want to think about it, do you? Because you've got this perfect little person. And I just thought it was because me and his dad are both blind, because Stefan is the real deal. He's got microanophthalmia, which is an eye condition which meant he was born without any actual eyes. So he has prosthetic eyes, which are beautiful, actually. And so I thought it was just learned behaviour, because he was always around me and Stefan, and he was just learning not to rely on sight too heavily.
Right, he was mimicking you, right?
Yeah,
that's what you
exactly.
thought.
Yeah. But when he started to present with this lack of focus, we took him to our GP, who sent us to a geneticist in Manchester, and we were lucky that we got to see one of the lead geneticists in the country, a man called Professor Graham Black. And he took one look at Dimitri and said, he definitely does have RP. We'll run all the tests, but I can tell by looking at him, and by looking at the way my eyes move as well. He said, I can tell that there's something congenitally inherited going on. And so I was devastated, because I felt tremendous guilt. I was really confused, because I thought, how has this happened? It's recessive, and yet my baby has has inherited this eye condition. And they were saying, it is possible you were misdiagnosed. We haven't run blood tests because they weren't available at the time in the mid-90s when I was diagnosed. I was registered blind in 1971, I would have thought, but I was told precisely what it was, and there were medical advances. By the mid-90s, they were able to tell you what it was and how it was passed on. They said, it might be X-linked, it might be, which seemed unlikely, because there's a 50-50 split of boys and girls in our family who have this eye condition, because my mum has 2 brothers who have it as well, and then one of her sighted sisters has 2 blind children from the 4 children she had.
Wow.
But it's because we're a very small village, and I'm not dismissing anybody's life choices, or I'm not shaming anyone, but there is a lot of intermarrying. that goes on, within families, because we are such a small village. My parents are second cousins, so their grandmothers were sisters. And my mother's sister married my dad's uncle, which none of it's illegal. It's just ill-advised.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I know. It sounds like Jude the Obscure going on here.
Honestly, Thomas Hardy could drop into our village and he would recognise it. Absolutely.
And Denise, we've talked to other people who've been on the show who've had RP and not living in a small community that have had, we had one gentleman on, and all of his siblings, one of his parents, all of his aunts and uncles, and he talked about, it was just, there were more people in his bloodline that had RP than not have RP.
Yeah.
So, So
the thing is, I was really worried for the older children because they had all been cleared of suffering from RP. Yeah. Although we knew that they would have inherited the faulty gene from me. Right. Anyway, they said, it could be dominant. So, and this was just before Christmas in 2013. So it was the 19th of December when we got the results from the ERG, the electroretinogram, which is where they bounce light off. Bounce light off Dimitri's retinas, and they said, there's just nothing going on at all. Actually, that wasn't strictly true. He did have a lot of vision to start with, but it deteriorated so quickly after the age of 7. And so I went home devastated, cried all the way home on the train, and got home, and I said to Steph, I just don't know how I'm going to tell them. I don't know, because this will change their lives too. And not only was I grieving for the life that I'd had planned for Dimmy, I was also grieving for the fact that I got to tell my older children, I'm sorry, that they may be blind. Yeah. And it was Christmas, and my daughter was coming home. She was working as an au pair in France, and she was coming home for the Christmas celebrations. The boys were still living at home. So I didn't want to tell the boys without telling Rebecca. I wanted to tell them together because it was such a big blow. Yeah. And she came home. The first thing she said to me was, Mum, what's going on with Dimitri's eyes?
I know. I'm sorry. You're just going to have to come back in next week to hear the rest of how this amazing story follows up. And actually, this was such a special interview that we're turning this into 3 episodes. So you're not going to want to miss any of these episodes because the stories get even more incredible. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thank you so much for all of your giving during Colorado Gives. You've got just a few days left, and we're going to make this thing count. We've got matching donations coming in, so make sure you get your dollars in, and we'd love to hear from you and be able to give you a shout out if possible. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and find some time to give back to yourself and be kind to yourself. And like Penn says, it's good for your soul.